It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You can get a hold of me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you reach out to me through my email, oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. We have today Michelle Wilkins, and she's running this group over here called whokilledkurt.org. And you can find her at Who Killed Kurt Official. It's a YouTube channel. It's also a Facebook group. And it's a podcast that comes out every Tuesday and Thursday. And they've been working on, she's convinced, and she's almost convinced me, we'll hear this together, that they have a whole new forensic report with the autopsy and all this kind of stuff, all brand new stuff. So Michelle, I can hear your voice. So Michelle Wilkins, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. Before we get into all this stuff, whokilledkurt.org and Who Killed Kurt Official on YouTube, who is Michelle Wilkins?
Well, that is the eternal question. Thank you for asking, Ed, and thank you for having me. I am, you know what? I'm actually a skincare expert, and I come from like a punk rock background. So when I was, in the early mid '90s, I got into all the kind of, Green Day and Nirvana and all of the punk bands of the day, and so I was a Nirvana fan when Kurt Cobain died. And, stuff happened, life went on. My husband and I played in punk bands, and we met, and we became, adults. I've always had an interest in, I've always questioned the status quo, like most of your listeners, I imagine, and like you as well, though I know you have some inside, information when it comes to that stuff. But I've always been, one of those annoying people who has to question everything. And so 2 years ago, I hadn't really thought of Kurt Cobain in, 27 years. I mean, again, I like Nirvana, but I wasn't a huge Nirvana fan. And my life was going reasonably well. My business was doing well. And my husband said, you know what, let's watch Nirvana play a show at the Paramount. It was one of their big shows, and it's on YouTube. And we had, like most people, we had a big TV, so we geared up for this. We watched it on Halloween, and it was so good. And it brought me back to those earlier days of going like, man, they were really good. And, as we were kind of reconnecting with Nirvana and we're both very nostalgic for the early 90s, and I was watching interviews with Kurt, and, he never seemed depressed to me. And that is the big thing about Kurt. Oh, he was depressed. People love the romantic. He was a tortured artist, And so I'm reading all this stuff, and I'm kind of doing a deep dive, and I'm realizing, wow, this guy actually did not seem outwardly suicidal. Now, I know that doesn't mean somebody isn't, but that was sort of my first kind of look going, okay, well, this isn't what I thought. So I'm doing more research, and I hook up with an investigator named Tom Grant, and he had done some work originally on the Cobain case. He had actually been hired by Courtney Love, who was Kurt's ex, to find Kurt when he was missing. And I'm air quoting that because, he wasn't actually missing. But so I started talking to Tom. And I thought, well, I'm an adult. I have a little money. Let's put some money into this and see if I can help this move forward. And then I found that there was a witness to Kurt's death. And I decided that I was going to make sure that we got a statement from him. So I organized that. And the rest, shall we say, is history. Now, this has been my life for 2 years. And it's very wild. You and I were talking, and you were saying, well, I've been doing this for a long time. Well, I haven't. I have my husband and my dog, and I treat a lot of acne. And now I also investigate strange, the death of one of the biggest rock stars of all time.
Yeah, Kurt Cobain. I've been looking at this situation for I became friends with Hank Harrison, Courtney Love's father.
Oh yeah,
was convinced of the death of the murder of Kurt Cobain. Yeah, so I've been looking at this thing for a long, long time. Had a little bit of everything involved there, but only a couple of years, and you're this deep into this, huh?
Yeah, I'm one of those people who obsesses about things. So once I get really into something, then I'm like, I'm very one-track mind. So I always tell people you could do the exact same thing I'm doing. Like if you want to talk about, Elliott Smith or John Lennon or something else, just, you can, as long as you just, as long as you obsess on something, you can, I think you can do a really good job. So, yeah.
Yeah, you could call it obsession, but it's also focus and intention. If you focus, whatever you focus on, you can achieve. And I'm 100% convinced of that. I'm a little older than you. I was actually, speaking of the punk scene, I grew up in New York City back in the 70s, and we used to hang out down at Yippie headquarters in Studio 10, right around the corner from a little place called CBGB's.
Did you see the Ramones?
Oh, you're kidding me? Of course, yeah.
Amazing.
It's funny because when I think of CBGB's, I mean, right now it's such an iconic, historical location. People think, they made the sign of the cross. But I remember when it wasn't cool anymore. I remember when, CBGB's has run its course and it wasn't considered like a cool place to hang out. So that's why you.
That's amazing. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I of course I missed, the Ramones. And well, I could have seen them. I think they only broke up in 96? So I could have technically seen them, but I was just a little too young. I mean, I also could have seen Nirvana probably, but again, I was just that few years where I would have had to see an all ages show, and I don't think they could have. A little too young, but.
I'm actually about to tape with Gary Lockman, who was from Blondie.
Amazing.
Oh, yeah, that was a brilliant student of the occult now. This guy's really considered like a worldwide authority on Crowley.
That's interesting. Very cool. I love Debbie. I think she had a story about a possible run-in with Ted Bundy. So that I always found was very, very interesting. That's so much fun history.
It's such a small world. Okay, so but in the world of Kurt Cobain, you pretty much just stumbled into it because you were like a fan watching a movie and you got a hold of Tom Grant. So then, what was your first real delving into digging up some new information? So,
because I had a little bit of money, a few people contacted me about a new witness. Now, the witness is named Joe Burns, and he was a tattoo artist in the early 90s, and he was friends with Kurt. So the house that they bought, Courtney, Kurt's wife, wanted them to buy a very large house. So they end up buying this very large house in Seattle, by where Bill Gates would live. So, it's very wealthy in the Lake Washington neighborhood. She convinces Kurt to buy this very large house, and it sort of becomes a drop-in center for all of their friends and people who were using at the time. So Joe Burns was hanging out there. He was a friend of Kurt's, and they would just kind of come and go as they pleased. And Joe is still an addict. He started using in about 91, and he has suffered a lot of PTSD because he knows what happened to Kurt. And he's been telling his story for years. He was there the night Kurt died, and I'll tell you what he said here in a second, but no one has ever listened to him. He was never questioned by the police. None of the people at the house that night were ever questioned by the police because it was assumed it was a suicide. And so this guy has been running around, Washington and Oregon and Los Angeles and telling people in the music scene, because he played in a band as well called Aspirin Feast. He was a drummer. And he's been telling people, listen, I was there the night Kurt died and this is what happened. But everybody, I think a lot of people in the music scene already know Kurt was murdered. And what can anybody really do, right? So he's been telling people this and nobody's ever listened to him. And when I first started talking to Joe, I felt that he didn't have a home at this point. He was living in his van. And I felt that we needed to really get his statement recorded, because if he passed away, the statement would die with Joe. And thank God that hasn't happened. But I really felt, we need to record this and make sure that we can get this to the police and, make sure that we can, that was me thinking the police might actually care at that point. But, so we organized 2 people to go interview him and, paid for him to fly and get interviewed. And so we recorded the interview. And so that was the sort of first new big portion of information. And what Joe tells us is very interesting. So he was there right before Kurt died. He went to a recovery center in Los Angeles called Exodus. And for some reason, and we're still not quite sure, he decided to leave the program early, and he flew home to Seattle. So this is in April of 1994. He gets home at about 1 a.m. on the 2nd of April, 94. Joe Burns is there with his girlfriend, Bonnie Dillard. There's another guy there. He is the Cobain nanny and a former boyfriend of Courtney's. His name is Callie DeWitt. And Callie's girlfriend was there. Her name was Jennifer Adamson. Jennifer Adamson was the stepsister of Macaulay Culkin and Kieran Culkin, and she passed away in the early 2000s of an overdose. But so there were a few people there, and they're all hanging out and they're doing drugs, and Joe is doing some tattoos on his friend Callie, and Kurt's there. And so they have this huge mansion, and there's a little greenhouse above the garage. And that's where Kurt likes to hang out. You know, he didn't grow up in a big house. And some of your listeners might recall John Lennon saying back in the day that they would just hang out in a very small portion of their large mansion. And so that's, I think, what Kurt did. He hung out in the greenhouse. He was also paranoid at this point. He felt that somebody was trying to hurt him. And he was hanging out in the greenhouse because you could see everybody coming and going in the driveway. And he came down to grab some food, and he was talking to Joe, and they were just, kind of having a conversation back and forth, nothing important. No one said that he seemed strange or felt like he was going to hurt himself or anybody else. And here's where things take a turn. Kurt's best friend at the time was named Dylan Carlson, and they had known each other for a long time. Dylan played in a band. He still plays in a band called Earth. Besides Jennifer, all of these people are still alive. So Dylan comes in the front door with two other guys that Joe doesn't recognize. And Joe says, all of a sudden, the vibe has changed. You can tell they're not just there to hang out. Like something is wrong. And they try to get Kurt to go back up to the greenhouse to shoot more dope. And Kurt doesn't want to go back up to the greenhouse. He's in the house. The greenhouse isn't heated, and he's been kind of hanging out in there. And he's like, no, I want to stay and hang out in the house. And they one of the guys takes over and says, screw this. We're going back up to the greenhouse. And he starts pushing Kurt back up to the greenhouse. And there are about 12 stairs outside. You have to walk outside and then walk up about 12 stairs to get up to the greenhouse. So they sort of forced Kurt back up to the greenhouse. And this is happening, and Joe's girlfriend, Bonnie, just wants to leave. So everybody is kind of running all over the house. They don't know what's going on. Joe is saying he doesn't know what to do because his girlfriend wants to leave. So they start to make their way out to the driveway to leave. And about 15 minutes later, they're standing in the driveway and they hear a shotgun. So they hear the shot that people would have thought took Kurt's life. Well, I'll explain why we know that's not what happened in a minute. But and then they get in the car, him, his girlfriend Bonnie, Callie Michael DeWitt, and Callie's girlfriend Jennifer get in the car, and they leave and go to Jennifer's house for the next few days. And the next thing they hear is that Kurt has passed away. Now, Joe says that as people are talking, when he's talking to Callie and talking to Dylan, they're talking about Kurt in the past tense already before it hits the news. So he already knows, he knew something was wrong that night, and he already knows that Kurt has passed away. I'm sure there are things that Joe has kept to himself or has buried as well. I don't know whether he saw Kurt's body in the greenhouse, but we know that, and he's spoken with our lawyer, and we have a very good sense that what he's saying matches up with the autopsy and matches up with the other forensics. So we do have corroborating evidence that Dylan Carlson is the ringleader, and that he is the person who spearheaded. Now, he didn't want to take. We don't believe he was the head of the triangle who kind of took Kurt's life. We believe that was Kurt's wife at the time. like many spouses do, but when they've signed a prenuptial agreement. But we have corroborating evidence that Dylan was there and that Dylan was the one who made sure Kurt didn't leave the greenhouse alive that night.
And Dylan Carlson, that's Courtney's ex-boyfriend.
Callie DeWitt is her ex-boyfriend. Now, he was a young kid. He was 18 or 19 at the time Kurt died. She had groomed him from when he was a teenager. And, she's 30 years old at this point. But Callie DeWitt was the male nanny and he was still using at the time, too, which is bizarre. But he was there. Dylan was just Kurt's friend. And, we believe that Kurt had, he had quit Lollapalooza. And he wanted to leave Nirvana, and he kind of wanted to do his own thing. He wanted to get clean and wanted to raise his daughter. And that meant the drugs that he was providing for everybody, the money he was providing for everybody was going to stop flowing. So we believe that Courtney said that she would take care of these people. I also believe that Courtney told Dylan and the other people who were involved, you know what, Kurt would want this. He does not, we don't think he really wants to live. He just can't, do this himself, which is absolutely not true. Kurt had a baby daughter and definitely, had no intention of going anywhere. But I think she manipulated a lot of people into thinking, including the press and everybody else who really knew Kurt at the time, that he was depressed and didn't want to go on. Okay,
so we have this new information from Joe Burns. Now, what about Kelly DeWitt and Jennifer and Dylan Carlson? Have they responded to this Joe Burns allegation?
Dylan has talked to people on Instagram and just said it's ridiculous. I wouldn't kill my best friends. Now, we have 3 other people who have told us Dylan has confessed to being there the night Kurt died, watching him die, and also we have an anonymous source who has told us that he confessed to killing his best friend. So, these are anecdotal. So obviously at some point when the case gets reopened, and we believe it'll get reopened fairly soon, the police will have to question. I think that people like Callie and Bonnie is doing quite well. She has a lovely family. She's very religious now. So she does not want to be associated with the Cobain name. But she was there and she knows what happened to Kurt. And we believe that when the police question her, she will come forward. So one of those people is going to come forward. Jennifer Adamson, before she died, told people that she was there the night Kurt died as well. She didn't give any other information. People think there perhaps was some sort of, that maybe Jennifer had said too much and that's why she passed away. We have very little information on Jennifer's death. We just know she died of an overdose.
Of all these people, has anybody been offered money to keep quiet?
Oh, yeah. So Dylan, we know that he was receiving money orders, really old school. He was receiving money orders at a post office box by the University Village in Seattle for 20 years after Kurt died. Now, see, Joe wasn't offered any money. He was never friends with Courtney. He was never offered any money to keep quiet. He was not in that sort of inner circle. And we know that Bonnie was threatened. We don't believe Bonnie has ever received any money, but she was threatened that her life would be in danger if she ever spoke. I don't believe Jennifer received any money, but Callie, he started working at Geffen after Kurt died, and he's had a very nice career in the art world. He's, like we said, he's designed for a lot of musicians, and he worked at Geffen, and so Courtney pulled a lot of strings for Callie as well.
Now, what about these 2 mysterious men? Have they ever been identified? Have they come forward? Any kind of whisper from these guys?
No. We do know that Dylan allegedly tried to kill someone else, and that person told us that Dylan and his dealer tried to off one of their good friends. We don't know who Dylan's dealer was. We have names of who it could have been, but Joe does not remember who they were, and whether or not he could be scared of them and doesn't want to say their names. I believe that they're still alive, because they're, I think if he did know who they were or had heard that they had died, he would have said, yes, it was this person, and they're gone now. The fact that Joe was willing, so Joe is still friends with Dylan. He stayed friends with Dylan up until his statement 2 or 3 years ago. Dylan would always put him on the guest list for his shows anytime he played where Joe was living. And this was Joe, I guess, betraying a friend, so this is not like, I mean, if it was me and I was just going to make up this story about my friend dying, I would not say the killer was somebody who was still alive and was a friend of mine. So, that again leads me to believe that Joe is being truthful. He was friends with Dylan, no issues with Dylan at all. And you can tell when Joe talks about Dylan, he feels like he's betraying him, So I'm quite convinced. And I had a lot of questions as to whether or not we should put Joe's statement out online, because if it wasn't Dylan, a year and a half ago when we put Joe's statement out, I've just ruined somebody's life. And so that was a big question mark for me. Should I be doing that? But we felt ultimately that somebody had to put the truth out there. And, this person has been living for 31 years, not only on Kurt's dime through Courtney, but through a lot of people who like his band, and not everybody. I know that his band, a lot of people like him for him, but a lot of people like him because he was friends with Kurt. And since we've put that out, like I said, we've gotten a lot of other people have come forward, and so yes, we believe wholeheartedly that Dylan was there, and hopefully, perhaps one will be offered a plea deal, and the police will be able to figure out who else was there.
What about, has anybody taken a polygraph?
Nobody's taken a polygraph. We had, right after I posted the Joe Burns interview, a gentleman named Matt Bell, who had done other podcasts about the Cobain case, reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'd love to have you on the podcast." And that was just so exciting. And so I did that podcast, and he and I have been working together ever since. He's paid for an incredible lawyer for us. I mean, we couldn't have gotten we'd just be podcasters shouting into the wind if Matt hadn't come along and said, "You know what, I'm going to help, and we're going to get this done." And so he would have paid for a polygraph, absolutely. But our lawyer, who was at the Seattle DA's office for 35 years, said, there's no point in getting him to do a polygraph. Traditionally, addicts don't do super well on polygraphs, and the police can give him a polygraph when we bring him in, to give a statement. So we decided to focus on, we actually got a copy of Kurt's autopsy through a family member, and we decided to focus on the forensics rather than simply Joe's statement.
Right. You have a new forensic report that's going to be peer reviewed in some forensic journal. Yes. So we just submitted it to the Journal of Forensic Sciences. It's a multidisciplinary report. So we have two medical doctors, a forensic pathologist, a crime scene reconstructionist, and a handwriting expert, and a gunshot residue expert. So we went and we looked at the available photos, and there aren't a lot. Washington State has a law, so it's a little different than California, where most celebrities die, where everything gets released to the public, autopsy photos, et cetera. Now, I'm not saying that that's the right way to go. Washington State, though, has a law where none of that gets released. So a while back, Courtney took it all the way up to the Superior Court in Washington and made it so that nobody could ever, no doctors, no scientists, no one could ever access Kurt's records. So she actually petitioned the Seattle police to burn all of the records, which they fortunately did not. But so all we have we have about 20 photos that the SPD released publicly, and we have the majority of Kurt's autopsy that we got from a family member. Kurt's grandfather thought he was murdered and ordered a copy of the autopsy before he passed away in 2012. So we have that copy of the autopsy, and we were able to work with those items to determine what we believe happened to Kurt. I saw recently that Courtney Love is serving cease and desist letters to people. Are you on the receiving
yes,
end
I was the recipient of that.
You were?
Yes. So we have merchandise that says "Justice for Kurt" or "Who Killed Kurt." So those things, that's valid. I knew that at some point they were going to say, take that off your website. And I understand that. I mean, I will never stop saying justice for Kurt or Kurt Cobain was murdered or Courtney did it, and they will have to come to Canada to sue me. We did have to take down some merchandise on the website, but we have now made free downloads for people, and I've sent downloads for people so they can print out their own shirts, stickers, card decals, every person that looks at that and says justice for Kurt, and kind of thinks about it, that's a win to me. So we never wanted to make any money. We just wanted people to help us get the word out. And they're really good conversation starters. So we did have to take some of those down. But as I'm having the conversation with the lawyer, and he's Courtney's personal lawyer, he says, what you're doing is deplorable. So I took that as a badge of honor. And he said, we want you to take certain things off of your YouTube. And so I said, well, you can tell me to take merchandise down that is, on my Shopify store, but you can't silence me on YouTube. And I'm a big advocate of ChatGPT. I don't think it should write for people, but I love its help. So I got my good friend Chad to help me write out a response to their lawyer, just stating that we won't be taking anything down on YouTube, and we have no plans on plans of being quiet. So yeah, he kind of backed off on that. They're still, removing things from our store, but we'll get them out to people other ways. That's okay.
Well, but their focus has been on the merchandise and not on the content of your investigation.
Well, they have. At first, the focus was on the merchandise because they know they have the legal right to do that. And then they utilized that to tell us to take down YouTube. And we said we would not do that. So then they sort of backed off that because they know they have no standing to tell us to take down our opinions from YouTube. And so then they just, they're doing their best to get the merchandise taken down.
Now, this team of experts in this forensic report, the ballistics and the gunshot residue and all these folks, who put this team together, and how did you contact them, or are they being compensated for all this? So Matt said he would finance a report, which was great. So Brian Burnett is the lead author of the paper. He has been doing this for 30 years. He actually started out as a marine biologist. He has 2 degrees. And he was utilizing microscopes in marine biology. He had crafted something that actually worked really well for gunshot residue. So he moved from marine biology. And for those out there who don't know, because I didn't know, there is no degree in crime scene reconstruction. So somebody like you, Ed, might go into crime scene reconstruction, a PI or a police officer, somebody who's worked in the field, or in this case, Brian, because he was very used to using these microscopes and it helped determining gunshot residue patterns. So he's been doing that for 30 years, and he worked on a case called the case of James Sabo. And I'm not sure if you remember that name, but basically it was during the Iran-Contra affair, and James had found out that somebody in America that they had been selling weapons, and so he was involved in all of that, and he ended up dead. And they said it was a suicide. His brother, who was a physician, knew it was not a suicide, and he and Brian worked on that for years. And the interesting thing is that the Sabo case has a lot of striking similarities to the Cobain case. They used a shotgun after an immense amount of drugs. So there were a lot of similarities, and a doctor friend of mine who had been researching the case for a long time said, you should contact Brian. He's the guy. And so I contacted Brian. We initially did pay him to do the report, but he has continued to work for hundreds of hours long after his retainer was up. And then he had worked with some other scientists, of course, along his decades long career, and he brought them into the fold. And then the gun guy is somebody who reached out to us. He's a former Marine, and he was like, you know what, I don't think the gun works the way that they said that the gun works. And I mean, the gun really here is our smoking gun. There are 2 big things that even if everything else, even if, let's say, Kurt was depressed, people did think he took his life, let's say all of those things were true, it doesn't matter because the gun and the autopsy prove when we go and look at the autopsy, what we had determined, and it is missing 2 to 3 pages, but what we've determined is that Kurt's organs were in necrosis before he died. So what that means is that his organs were shutting down. So his brain and his liver were both being starved of oxygen, and he couldn't have lifted a shotgun at that point. He was basically brain dead. He was lying there. His brain, there was still a tiny bit of blood pumping, but he was comatose at the time that the shotgun went off.
So here's what the SPD says happened and what they would like everyone out there to believe for people, most people who haven't, studied the case. Kurt Cobain goes up to the greenhouse. He decides he's going to take his own life. He shoots up with 3 times the lethal amount of heroin, even for a seasoned user. Now, tolerance varies. That is true. However, Kurt would have had to use at least 3 needles. So they say that he heated up the heroin. He didn't tie off. There was no tourniquet found. So they say he injected himself with 3 needles. Then he rolled down his sleeves, because his sleeves were found rolled down and buttoned up. So he shoots himself up at least 3 times, rolls his sleeves down, buttons them up, moves the kit away because the kit was not in reaching distance from him when it was found, positions a 5-foot shotgun. Now, Kurt wasn't particularly tall. This is a very, very long, awkward shotgun. He positions that in his mouth, holds it about 6 inches above his head, and shoots himself in the upper palate of the mouth. So there are so many problems with that. And the main difference between what we say and what the SPD says, the SPD admits the heroin would have killed Kurt. They just believe he had enough time to do all of that and had the mindset to be able to do all of that. We believe, and we know this because the autopsy tells us, we know that he was out right after that heroin. So there's a metabolite of heroin called 6-MAM, and that only shows up in an autopsy when heroin has been taken very close to the time someone dies. So it's not like he could have taken all that heroin over, a 12-hour period, and then it's showing up in the autopsy as this crazy amount of heroin. He had 6-MAM in his autopsy, in the toxicology report. So we know that heroin was within about 20 minutes of death. So he was given a hot shot, we believe. There's a wound, and the picture is in the forensic report, which is free on our website. There is a large needle that we believe he was jabbed with, and you'll see that photo in there where he was actually jabbed with that large needle. And he was given the hot shot. He was dying of that. They positioned the shotgun over him and shot him in the mouth. Now, here's what the gun tells us. The gun is a very old school, just post-World War II shotgun. Mm. It does not, if you have a hand on the forward part of the barrel, that shotgun will not release a shell. The mechanism can't move to release a shell. When they found Kurt's body, 2 different Seattle police reports state that his hand was wrapped around the barrel of the gun. So the barrel of the gun, the forward barrel of the gun, is close to his mouth. Now, first of all, that hand has no blood on it. And if anyone has ever seen photos of a shotgun suicide, there is a lot of backspatter. So the shell that went into Kurt's head was birdshot. Kurt told everybody, I bought this shotgun for protection. He had no security system at the house. He bought birdshot to protect from burglars because it won't go through a wall, and it's probably not going to kill someone if it's not at close range. So he got birdshot. So that's what ended up in Kurt's head, were all these birdshot pellets. There's no exit wound in Kurt's head. So the brain matter, but the brain matter and the blood matter has to go somewhere. And it didn't come out Kurt's mouth because it's not on his hand. So there's no possible way that Kurt's hand could have been on that shotgun. Either his hand was on the shotgun when it went off and it was wiped clean, or it wasn't on the shotgun when the gun went off. And if his hand wasn't on the shotgun, somebody else's was. So we believe that they put his hand, manipulated his hand onto the shotgun after they shot him. Now, on the left-hand side of Kurt's body, there is a shotgun shell, a yellow shell, and the shotgun is found stock up. So the shotgun shell should be to the right, but it's up and to his left. We're talking about, some Harry Potter style magic here. They claim that the shotgun spun in midair. Now, this is a 7-pound shotgun. It's not spinning in midair. We've done a lot of testing on that, and there is absolutely no way that this gun spun in midair. So as we're doing the testing, then we realize, well, shoot, that shotgun should not have expelled a shell at all. It's not just in the wrong place. There should be no shell because of where Kurt's hand is on the gun. And so this is detailed heavily in the report. So what we believe happened was someone stood over Kurt with the shotgun facing the right side up, so that the shell would end up where it ended up, because they didn't have their hand on the forward barrel. They shot Kurt in the mouth, And then they placed the gun on Kurt's chest and put his hand around the gun.
Okay.
So
that's why on the site Who Killed Kurt, you call it the magic bullet.
Yeah, exactly. It's the magic bullet of the grunge era. Now, I know that it's not actually a bullet, it's a shell, but I mean, that just sounded catchier. So yeah, I like to compare it to JFK, just because it's about as ridiculous. You know, when you actually look at the scene, and you know, I bet the SPD is wishing they didn't release any photos at all, but the ones we have do tell a story. And you know, there's other stuff. The bottom of Kurt's shirt is covered in blood, and there's no reason for it to be covered in blood. There's no blood above the big blood stain. So we believe that Kurt was repositioned in the greenhouse. He was picked up. His head was lying forward as he was being carried, and the blood that was coming out. So there was some blood coming out of his nose, his mouth, and his ear, because again, there's no exit wound. And that blood dripped onto his shirt. And then they positioned him in the greenhouse underneath the windows, where he was eventually found. And his ex-wife called an electrician to go put security right in the greenhouse 3 days after Kurt died, just right in the spot where he would find Kurt. So it's, you know, some very interesting, I guess if you want to call them synchronicities, or just, you know, good planning on her part. That's how he was found. And, you know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. From the day that the shotgun was in use, how much time prior had he purchased the shotgun? Yeah, that's a great question. He purchased the shotgun right before he went to Exodus. So he purchased it at the end of April, and then he left it at his house and got home from Exodus, like I said, on the 2nd. So he'd had it for about 4 days, but he literally purchased it like right before he went to Exodus, and bought the shells the next day. He actually left the shells with the limo driver who drove him to the airport. He remembered right at the last minute, oh, shoot, like I can't take these shells on the plane. I'm just going to leave them here. Asked the limo driver, can you make sure you get these back to me? And by the time the limo driver knew he was home, he had heard on the news that Kurt had died. So he didn't have time to get the shells back to him. So, but yeah, it was quite quick. Wait,
and
so
then
then he had other shells? I'm not understanding. He had other shells, you're saying?
So there's a report that someone went and bought more shells on the 2nd of April when Kurt got home. So Kurt got home at about 2 a.m. and then Stan's gun shop in Seattle said that someone who looked like Kurt came in and bought shotgun shells that day. Now, we don't know whether that was Kurt or not, because a lot of the people hanging out at Kurt's house kind of looked like Kurt. You know, they were all kind of grunge. Interestingly, the person at the gun store was a huge Nirvana fan and said that he would have recognized if it had been Kurt. We don't know whether it was Kurt or not who bought those shells. If it was Kurt, we believe he was buying them for protection. It could have been somebody else, though, who knew that they were going to do this over the next few days. Well, I tend to believe Kurt bought the shells, but...
Did they find a box of shells at the house?
Yes.
They did?
Oh, yeah. And it was so, Ed, you should see the photos. It looks like a bad movie. You know, the kit is all there, and it's very organized, and everything is clean, and it's put back in the kit. And the shells are right at Kurt's feet, right where the gun would have, you know, most likely had Kurt been holding it, it would have actually hit where those shells are, but they're sitting perfectly at Kurt's feet. They have the receipt for the shells in his pocket. Like everything that a cop would want to go, oh, he purchased these shells, and oh, the shells are right there. They had everything set up beautifully to look as if, you know, it was a little too clean, I think.
Now the story is that he purchased the shotgun because he was afraid for security. What was he afraid of?
I think he was afraid of Courtney, to be honest. But so about a month prior to, and this is something that people who have followed the story believe proves that he took his own life. A month prior, he was in Rome. Yeah. He was touring with Nirvana, and he got bronchitis, and he was sick. And it was their anniversary, him and Courtney's. And Courtney had been cheating on him with Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins, who she had been dating prior to Kurt. And so instead of going to visit Kurt and bring their baby daughter to see him in Europe, she was shopping in London and, you know, flitting around with Billy Corgan, and Kurt knew this. And so he wanted a divorce. And by the time she got there, they got into a big sort of fight, and he told her he wanted a divorce. And the next day, he ends up in a hospital in Rome after overdosing. The overdose was not heroin, it was Rohypnol, and the prescription was Courtney's. And Kurt didn't really take Rohypnol, and he didn't drink champagne. So what we believe happened is she put the Rohypnol in his champagne. The doctors at the time said this was not a suicide attempt, this was accidental. It was an accidental overdose, and fortunately he survived. No one ever said it was a suicide attempt until after Kurt was dead and after he could not speak for himself, saying that was absolutely not suicide. We've talked to people, we've talked to nurses who worked at the hospital when he was in it. No one thought that Kurt was suicidal. Everyone thought it was an accident. And the interesting thing, though, is that Courtney stated she found Kurt lying on the floor at about 3 a.m. with a note in his hand and money in the other hand, and the note said that he was leaving her. And he had blood coming out of his nose. And then she didn't call the front desk of the hospital until 6 a.m. to get him an ambulance. And this is her own statement. So no one is quite sure why she let Kurt lie there for 3 hours. She believed he was dead. So, of course, it seems to us that this was her first attempt at taking his life. Whether Kurt realized that, we don't know. We just know that, his house had no security. He was concerned about the safety of his baby, and perhaps he knew that something wasn't right. Perhaps there was maybe the memory wasn't even full, but he knew that somebody may be after him.
Now, had he ever fired the shotgun before?
No. Now, he was an avid gun collector. So
really?
a few months prior, he had a bunch of guns, and there's a police report that talks about he and Courtney get into a big argument, and she calls the police and says, "My husband's locked in the bathroom with guns. He's suicidal. You need to come." And the cops come. Kurt is walking around the backyard, and he tells the police, and this is all in the police report, "The guns are in the closet. You can go check. I didn't have the gun in the bathroom. I just locked myself in there or in the closet to get away from Courtney." So some reports say the bathroom, some say the closet. But he was simply just locked her out of the room because she was very abusive. And, she screamed at him. She hit him. Classic case of spousal abuse. And the police ended up confiscating those guns. So Kurt said, "Yeah, it's fine, take them," and so they confiscated his guns. So that's why he needed to go buy a shotgun, because he believed that his life was in danger and wanted to protect his house and his family. So that's why he didn't have any of his other guns at the time.
Gotcha. Okay, so then what else? That pretty much settles the gun issue, right?
Yes, exactly right.
Okay.
Well, except people don't, one of the things that people don't understand is they say, well, the heroin would have killed him. Why did they shoot him? Because we have to be honest, if it wasn't for them using the gun, we wouldn't be able to prove it was homicide. So that was their big mistake.
Real quick. Now, how would Dylan or those two men, how would they know that he bought a new gun? That's
a great question.
Courtney could have told them. Or how would they know that? How would they know that he had purchased new shells?
Well, that's a great question. So Dylan claims he didn't speak to Kurt after Kurt left for rehab, yet he knew that Kurt left those shells in the limo with the limo driver. And the limo driver, I've spoken with him. I talk to him all the time. He's a great guy. Dylan, he has never spoken to Dylan. So Dylan somehow knew that those shells were in the car and that Kurt left them there. So did he talk to Kurt while Kurt was at Exodus? Did he talk to Courtney? Someone told Dylan that and Dylan was with Kurt. Sorry, Dylan bought Kurt the gun. So Kurt thought that he couldn't buy the gun because they confiscated his last gun. So Dylan went with Kurt and bought the gun. So that's,
Then Dylan would have been familiar with the gun as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And Dylan is very familiar with guns too. So he and Kurt would go out in the woods and stuff, and they would shoot guns at targets all the time. And, so we believe that either Dylan spoke with Courtney or Kurt from Exodus. At that point, Kurt had no reason to believe that his best friend was going to end his life. So, but yeah, so he was well aware of that they needed more shells. So people say, why would they use a gun when the heroin would have killed him? And I think there are two really good reasons for that. One, because they thought the drugs were going to kill him in Rome and Kurt survived. So they didn't want to take another chance. Because Kurt was leaving Seattle. He had gone home after Exodus and he was out. He was going to work with Michael Stipe on some music and he was leaving. He was getting a divorce from Courtney. We have proof that he had asked his lawyer for a divorce and he was done with all of it. So I think they knew they had to get him and make sure it worked this time before he left Seattle. And then two, Courtney is a drama queen. She loved the idea of people's last thought of Kurt being that he blew his head off. And she talks about his head being separated from his body, there being nothing left. None of that's true. There wasn't even an exit wound. It was very easy to recognize Kurt, even when, there was some blood coming out of his eye, but he was very recognizable. She wanted his head blown off. And she has talked many times. There was a quote where she said, when someone overdoses, that could be an accident, but when someone blows their head off, they're serious. I mean, she said that in a magazine years prior. So that's why she used a shotgun. She, just Kurt maybe overdosing seems like, oh, maybe he didn't want to take his life. She knew that using a shotgun would make the story that much bigger. She's very media savvy.
So then after the gun, what else do we have in this report?
So we have the gun, we have the autopsy, which I've gone over a little bit, and the toxicology. Another thing we have that's really interesting is the handwriting. So at Kurt's death scene, there is, so this is the cops walk in and they go, he's gripping a shotgun and there's a suicide note stabbed into a planter, because it's a greenhouse, stabbed into a planter over here with a red pen in the middle of it. He wrote a suicide note. Obviously, he took his life. Now, the suicide note mostly talks about leaving Nirvana. It's like, when Freddie Mercury walks out on stage and people cheer from him, you can see in his face how much he's enjoying it. I don't feel that. And I'm faking it and I can't, that's not fair to you. It's not fair to me. Basically, he's talking about quitting Nirvana, perhaps even quitting music, but taking a break. There's nothing about quitting life, nothing about leaving his daughter, nothing about that in the first part of the note. At the bottom part of the note, there are 4 lines. And anyone can look at that note and see that the handwriting is different. There are 4 lines added to the bottom of the note in different handwriting that basically say, please, Courtney, please keep going for Frances. Her life will be so much better off without me in it. I love you. I love you. Kurt Cobain. So, that has been discussed for 31 years. That's some of the evidence that people have known about for quite a while. And they did an Unsolved Mysteries about Kurt Cobain's death, and they had some really, really prestigious handwriting experts on it who said that, it's hard because we don't have the original note. So we have a faxed copy of that note because the police gave that note back to Courtney. They didn't keep it in evidence. They gave it to Courtney, and she says she destroyed the note. So we have a faxed copy. That's what everyone has seen. To the best of most good handwriting analysis, to the best of their ability, they definitely say the bottom 4 notes are either written by a different hand or they could be written by Kurt in a rush. However, the most recent analysis that we had done, it was done by a man named Jim Green. He's worked with police and in court handwriting analysis for a very long time. So he's not like test your love language by looking at your handwriting. He's a court-approved handwriting analysis. And he said that the bottom 4 lines could have been written by Kurt or Courtney, and that Courtney's handwriting matched Kurt's so well that he can't determine who wrote it. And I said to Jim, now, is that normal? My writing doesn't look anything like my husband's. I don't know about yours, Ed, if it looks like your spouse's or, and he said, absolutely not. He's never seen that before in his career. He said that sometimes when children are learning to handwrite, their handwriting will mimic the teacher, but that as people grow older, their handwriting is always, it always takes on its own flair. Now, the interesting part about those last 4 lines as well is that Kurt and Courtney shared the same lawyer. The lawyer that Kurt asked to start divorce proceedings and take Courtney out of his will, found a practice note that Courtney had been using to mimic Kurt's handwriting in her backpack around the time of Kurt's death. So Courtney was practicing Kurt's handwriting, and it's very clear to us that she wrote the last 4 lines of that note. And not only did she not match the writing exactly, the tone of it was so embarrassing to Kurt. Kurt, we have a lot of Kurt's journals because she released them for money years later. And so we uploaded those and all of Courtney's known writings into a custom AI simulator. And what it found was that not only is the writing different, but the tone of the writing is very different. Kurt has never begged in his life in any of his writing, please, do this. And then I love you, I love you. Whereas we have writing of Courtney's that says exactly that. I love you, I love you. So she does that repetitive sort of writing in her journal all the time. And so we not only know that the mechanics of the writing is wrong, the tone of the writing is wrong. And now I know skeptics will say, well, Kurt wasn't in his right mind. And yes, that is true. But everything that we've ever found points to Courtney writing that. I mean, who has a practice note practicing their spouse's writing for no reason?
They have those forensic linguists, that will.
Yes.
Yeah, you should talk to one of those. Yeah. Now, we're pretty much out of time, though. And I know you wanted to leave us with this thing about how kids out there, that there's a lot of copycat suicides.
Yes, and so I'll be super quick. Since Kurt passed away, we know that there are at least 80 children who have taken their own lives because they believe Kurt did, and we know that because they've left notes. Suicide notes are only present in about 30% of cases, so we know that there are many, many other children and young adults who have taken their lives because they believe Kurt Cobain did. One of them happened 1.5 to 2 years ago. So people are still taking their lives because they believe their hero, Kurt Cobain, did that. And it has to stop. We can't let it rest. We can't continue to let this injustice stand. And, I think somebody needs to speak to all the children who took their lives because they believe Kurt did.
Oh, boy. I got real quick, man. I got to tell you, the past couple of years, I was dying, man. I couldn't even breathe. I was thinking about the afterlife constantly. And I got to tell you, man, I'm so much better now, the miracles do happen, and no matter how bad life looks, man, it can look so hopeless. But it's just, you got to really hold on and don't ever give up. Yeah. And,
most of these people were in their teen years.
Yeah.
Their hormones are crazy. They're super dramatic. And a lot of them died playing Nirvana on the stereo or, carving Kurt into their arm they could have gone on to have lives, and it didn't need to happen.
Oh, boy. We've been talking to Michelle Wilkins, whokilledkurt.org. You can find their podcast at Who Killed Kurt Official on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Plays, all that kind of stuff. There's a brand new forensic report coming out. You can find it over there at the whokilledkurt.com, whokilledkurt.org website, too, as well. Anything you want to leave us with? We got about a minute left.
No, I hope that we get this case reopened within this year, and I think we're going to do it, and I hope that leads the way to, other cases that may be homicides framed as suicides and people looking into those as well. And we just appreciate everyone. We think everyone who realizes that Kurt didn't take his own life is a win for us. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, real quick, before we go, what is the process for getting the case reopened? Who are you in contact with? The district attorney's office?
So we are going to both the medical examiner's office and trying to convince him to change the death certificate from suicide to undetermined. And we are going into the Seattle Police Department as well to show them our evidence. And I think we have more than enough evidence to at least say, you guys have access to all the photos and the autopsy and the stuff we don't have, the missing pages of the autopsy. We just want you to do a real investigation. They didn't investigate the first time. We're not saying you have to come to the homicide conclusion, but please show us that you took this seriously and did an actual investigation. And we believe that the SPD they're a different group of people than they were 31 years ago. We think that they're going to do the right thing this time.
And where are we in that process? You presented this information, or you're waiting for the peer review?
By the time this comes out, we'll have presented the information, I believe. Yeah. So hopefully you'll have me back on, and we'll talk about what happens next.
Oh, definitely. If they reopen a case, you're coming back. You'd be a weekly guest.
Perfect. I love it.
You'd be my co-host. Michelle Wilkins, thank you so much. You'll never be a co-host. No one will put up with me for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks in a row. It'll never happen. But Michelle Wilkins, thank you much. whokilledkurt.org is the base where you can get all this. And there's a bunch of documents on it, too. If you go to this page, what's it called here?
I think it's the deep dive page, and we have all the documents. There's so much more. We have all the SPD documents, other lawsuits against Courtney. Yeah, everything's there. And email us. We'll answer your questions. Happy to do it.
Yeah, that's the one, the deep dive page. There's a bunch of PDFs on there. You can open up and take a look at them. Spend hours and hours and hours researching. Michelle Wilkins, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it. You take care.
Good night.
Okay, bye-bye.